Right before the break, we got a little John going on. Caitlyn says, hey, you and me, Hayes, you and me. This is how you bring the roof down. All tied up here with 5:14 to go.
There are games where a player performs well despite the circumstances. And then there are games where the circumstances themselves become the fuel, where every foul, every elbow, every piece of trash talk, and every moment of physical disrespect gets converted into something that looks a lot like controlled destruction. What Caitlyn Clark did against the Golden State Valkyries was not just a strong statistical performance. It was a statement delivered in the most direct language basketball allows, which is winning, doing it convincingly, and making sure the people who tried to stop you feel every minute of it on the final scoreboard. Clark walked into that arena carrying real physical uncertainty from a back injury that had been lingering in the days leading up to the game. She walked out of it with visible scratches on her arms, a technical foul she did not even know she had received, a flagrant foul call on a hard screen, and a stat line of 22 points and 9 assists on 47% shooting. The Golden State Valkyries ran their most physical defensive game plan of the season against her. They grabbed her, held her, bumped her off her spots, sent multiple bodies at her, and tried to make the entire game an exercise in making her uncomfortable enough to stop competing at full intensity. It did not work. It made things considerably worse for them. This is the story of how Clark came back from injury, absorbed everything the Valkyries threw at her for 40 straight minutes, and walked out of that building with a win that sent a message to every team in the league still searching for an answer to a problem they have not solved yet. To fully understand what happened in this game, you have to start before the opening tip, because the physical and mental context Clark was operating under gives everything else its proper weight. Back soreness sounds like a minor, manageable thing when you read it in an injury report, and for a lot of physical tasks in everyday life, it probably is. But for a basketball player whose game is built on explosive first steps, quick direction changes, hard drives into contact, and the ability to plant and launch from deep range, soft tissue issues in the back are a different category of problem entirely. The physical pain is only one piece of it. The larger issue is what that pain does to the mental side of competing, because every time you plant your foot hard, every time you absorb a hit going toward the basket, there is a quiet voice somewhere in the back of your mind asking whether this particular movement is the one that makes the injury worse. Clark addressed this directly in her pregame comments, and what she said was genuinely revealing for someone with her competitive profile. She called the return from soft tissue injuries a real mental challenge and said plainly that if she does not feel 100% confident in her body, she is not sure it is worth playing through. That is a surprisingly honest admission. Most players in her position would give you the standard line about feeling good and being ready to compete. Clark acknowledged the doubt, talked about the mental block of certain what-ifs getting into your head, and then said she had done a really good job managing it while allowing for the possibility that there would be days she took a step backward. That kind of honesty matters here because it tells you exactly what she was carrying into this game. She was not walking in fully healthy and fully confident. She was walking in with a body she was still learning to trust again, knowing that she was about to spend 40 minutes getting grabbed and held by a team that had made physical defense their primary strategy against her all season. The pregame question was not really whether she was healthy enough to be in uniform. It was whether she could play free, whether she could commit fully to drives, finish at the rim, and pull up from range without the hesitation that comes from a body that has not yet been fully trusted. Because that kind of hesitation, that split-second pulling back, kills rhythm and confidence faster than any defender in the league can. The first quarter answered the question before it needed to be asked twice. Clark did not ease into this game. She did not test the waters or feel out the pace or give herself a few possessions to shake off the rust from the injury. She went straight at the Valkyries from the opening possession and did not stop. By the time the first quarter was over, she had scored or assisted on 17 of Indiana's first 21 points. That number is worth sitting with for a moment. 17 of 21 points. She finished at the rim, found cutters on time with accurate passes, and pulled up from range, all of the movements that require full physical commitment from a body she had been second-guessing in the days leading up to tip-off. That first quarter was not Clark playing it safe because she was coming back from an injury. It was Clark playing like she had something to prove, not primarily to the Valkyries, but to herself. When you have been uncertain about your body and that uncertainty has been sitting in your mind for days, there is a specific kind of relief that comes from going out and doing the things you were unsure about and finding out your body responds the way you need it to. That relief has an energy to it, and the Indiana Fever fed off it from the first possession of the game. Stephanie White talked post-game about how Clark's emotion, when it gets channeled the right direction, benefits the entire team and is one of the qualities that makes her special as a player. White's framing was deliberate. She was not talking about managing Clark's emotion or keeping it in check. She was talking about aiming it. And that distinction is everything when it comes to understanding how Indiana uses what Clark brings into these moments. The Golden State Valkyries were not being randomly physical with Clark. There was a plan operating here, and it was disciplined and consistent across all 40 minutes. Crowd her before she catches the ball. Bump her off her spots on the perimeter. Make her earn every single touch by putting a body on her constantly. If she drives, have someone waiting at the rim to make the finish as difficult as possible. If she pulls up, close out hard enough to alter the shot even if you cannot block it. And off the ball, make sure she feels contact every time she tries to set up her next action. Tiffany Hayes was the most consistent presence in that physical game plan. The type of off-ball contact Hayes was applying, the grabbing and holding that makes it genuinely difficult for a player to get clean separation, is the kind of thing that is hard to call consistently because officials cannot always see it clearly. But it wears on a player over the course of a game, and it wore on Clark enough that the two of them were jawing at each other throughout the second half. Clark clearly noticed every bit of what Hayes was doing, and she filed it away for later. The Valkyries' game plan also had a specific ISO heavy offensive approach targeting Clark on the defensive end. Clark talked post-game about how Golden State was hunting isolation matchups against her specifically, going top of the key ISO after ISO, looking to exploit any defensive uncertainty. Indiana's response was to force contested twos, trust their individual defense, and make Golden State's best players work for every single look they got. The Fever held the Valkyries to 4 for 17 from the field in the fourth quarter. That is not a coincidence. That is a defensive approach that held up precisely because every Indiana player committed to it when it mattered most. The biggest flash point of the game came right before halftime. After a missed shot, Clark attempted to swipe the ball from Janelle Salon as the buzzer sounded. Salon pushed Clark in response and then extended an actual elbow toward Clark's chest. And within seconds, the two of them were face to face with teammates and coaches rushing in from both directions to separate them before things escalated further. Both players were assessed technical fouls. Salon and Clark traded some final words and headed to their respective locker rooms. The detail that became genuinely funny by the end of the night was that Clark did not know she had received that technical until a reporter told her during the post-game interview. Her reaction was authentic surprise delivered without any performance attached to it. She said effectively that she could have gotten ejected and that she should have been a little safer in the second half. And then she asked, almost to herself, how much her fine was going to cost her. The surprise was real. She had been so completely locked into the competition that the official call did not register in the moment. That tells you more about how intense that final sequence before halftime actually was than any description of the incident itself. Indiana went into halftime down 7. That is a difficult spot in any game. But in a game where the star player had just nearly gotten into a physical altercation, had been absorbing, holding, and grabbing for 20 straight minutes, and was coming back from an injury she had publicly admitted created real mental challenges, a 7-point deficit could have become the moment the whole thing unraveled. It did not. What came out of that locker room in the second half looked nothing like a team that had been rattled. Clark came out of halftime with something specific behind her eyes, and the Valkyries felt it immediately on the first possession of the third quarter. She attacked. Layups with contact, quick decisions in transition, passes to cutters when the defense collapsed trying to stop her drive, and the kind of aggressive rim attacks that forced defenses into impossible choices. Golden State could not reset fast enough to handle the pace Clark was setting, and Indiana's deficit began to disappear. And then came the shot. Clark pulled up from the logo, not from the three-point line, not from a step or two beyond the arc. From the logo on the court, which is well beyond any rational shooting range, with Tiffany Hayes closing out on her. Hayes, who had been grabbing and holding Clark for the better part of 2 quarters, who had been getting in her head all night, who was the central piece of Golden State's physical game plan against her. Clark caught the ball, saw Hayes coming, and instead of driving or finding a teammate or doing anything that a normal player with a back injury playing against hard physical defense might reasonably choose to do, she just shot it. It went in. The game was tied at 48. Commentators described it as coming from another stratosphere. One analyst noted afterward that Hayes struggled to score for the rest of the game, seemingly so focused on getting under Clark's skin that she had lost track of her own offensive rhythm. When you try to frustrate someone like Clark, and the result is a logo 3 hit in your face in front of a roaring crowd, the psychological cost to the defender is real. Clark did not force that shot out of frustration. She waited for exactly the right moment and made the most disrespectful shot in basketball with perfect form and perfect timing. Stephanie White's halftime adjustments played directly into this sequence. She increased the pick and roll usage between Clark and Aaliyah Boston, which gave Clark cleaner looks on the perimeter and forced Golden State defenders into split-second decisions they were not prepared to make against a player operating at Clark's processing speed. When the Valkyries loaded up to stop her drives, Clark found cutters. When they dropped back to protect the paint, she pulled up from range. When a second defender came early, she kicked it to the open shooter in rhythm. The adjustments created the conditions. Clark executed within them at the highest level. Clark going nuclear gets the headline, and it deserves it. But Indiana did not win this game on one player's stat line. 3 other players delivered at exactly the right moments, and the timing of each contribution was almost too clean to be coincidental. Aaliyah Boston finished with 20 points and 16 rebounds, and the rebounding number is the one that does not get sufficient attention. The Valkyries have real size and length in the paint, so those 16 boards were not collected uncontested. Boston was fighting for every single one of them against physical opposition. What that meant practically was that Indiana kept possessions alive on the offensive end while eliminating Golden State's opportunities on the offensive glass. Every time a Valkyries defender collapsed on Clark or Mitchell and gave up an offensive rebound, Boston extended the possession and kept the play alive. Every time Indiana needed a defensive stop, Boston cleaned the glass and eliminated the putback before it started. 16 rebounds in a game that physical is not a counting statistic. It is a body of work that changed the outcome by keeping Indiana's possession advantage intact across 40 minutes. Kelsey Mitchell scored 19 points and went a perfect 11 for 11 from the free throw line. That free throw number is what actually decided the fourth quarter in practical terms. When games tighten and the trailing team starts fouling strategically, you need players who walk to the line and convert without drama, without hesitation, without any of the psychological weight of the moment landing on their mechanics. Mitchell was that player 11 consecutive times. No misses, no close calls, just points on the board at the moments Indiana needed them most. There is no defensive adjustment available for a player who simply does not miss. Golden State fouled. Mitchell made them pay every single time. Sophie Cunningham came off the bench and contributed 11 points, with her scoring burst in the fourth quarter arriving at exactly the moment Indiana's offense had slowed slightly because Clark was drawing so much defensive attention. Opponents do not spend their film sessions game planning a bench player's fourth quarter scoring. That obscurity is precisely what makes it effective. Cunningham stepped into the space created by all the attention directed at Clark and Boston and made Golden State pay for the defensive imbalance. Raven Johnson and Lexi Hull contributed in supporting roles as well, which meant Indiana's depth held up against a physical opponent deep into the fourth quarter when tired legs typically expose roster weaknesses. Clark's post-game comments were worth paying attention to for reasons beyond the standard recap. Her reaction to finding out about the technical foul mid-interview told you everything about where her head was for 40 minutes. She was not managing her image or calculating how the moment was going to look. She was completely inside the game, and the technical simply did not register while it was happening. Her comments on the flagrant foul were equally direct. She acknowledged why the call was made, talked plainly about the tension between playing physically and staying on the right side of the officiating line, and owned her role in the exchange without deflecting responsibility onto the officials. Most players in that situation give you the diplomatic non-answer that offends no one and says nothing. Clark just said what she actually thought, which is that she was going to play hard, that it was going to cost her sometimes, and that she was aware of both sides of that reality while still preferring the fire to its absence. She also talked about what those intense competitive moments mean to her as a player. She said she loves the game, loves being out there, loves those moments that get the crowd into it and get teammates hyped. She acknowledged that there is probably a better balance available to her, that all the talking and intensity gets a little exhausting, but she framed it as something she would rather manage than eliminate. That self-awareness is what separates the post-game comments from a rant. She's not pretending the flagrant was a bad call or that the technical was someone else's fault. She owns her part while also being honest about what the Valkyries were doing to her throughout the game. The Indiana Fever came into this game with a player carrying physical uncertainty from a recent injury, walked into a building against a team committed to a grinding physical defensive game plan, fell behind by 7 points at halftime after the near altercation, and then came out of the locker room and systematically dismantled a disciplined opponent in the second half. The Valkyries ran their plan for all 40 minutes. They grabbed, they held, they bumped, they sent multiple bodies at Clark from every angle, and they went into halftime with a lead. By the fourth quarter, Indiana held the lead and Golden State had run out of answers. A team that committed to fouling and physical contact as their primary defensive strategy walked out of that building with a loss. Clark's first full season demonstrated that she could change attendance numbers and television ratings while pushing Indiana to the playoffs. What this season is beginning to show, game by game, is that she can do all of that while being physically targeted every single night and still produce at an elite level. The gap between what opponents are attempting to do to her and what she is actually producing continues to widen rather than narrow. Teams around the league have had a full year to develop an answer to the problem she presents. The Golden State Valkyries tried harder than most. Clark left that building with scratches on her arms and a win. There is a version of a player who gets grabbed and held and elbowed and trash-talked for 40 minutes and lets it add up in the wrong direction, who lets the physical toll become a mental one, who starts hesitating at moments that require full commitment and lets the cumulative frustration of an uncalled foul or a cheap elbow pull focus away from the actual game being played. Caitlyn Clark is not that version. What the Valkyries discovered last night is what several other teams have discovered before them, that the physical approach does not slow her down. It activates something. The scratches on her arms, the technical she did not know about, the flagrant on a hard screen, the near brawl at halftime, the logo 3 in Tiffany Hayes' face, the 22 points and 9 assists on 47% shooting while coming back from a back injury, none of those things exist in isolation. They are all part of the same thing, which is a competitor who performs better when someone gives her a reason to. The Golden State Valkyries gave her several, and the Indiana Fever walked out of that building with a win that the rest of the league should pay close attention to, because what Clark showed was not just that she can handle adversity. It was that adversity is, at this point in her career, something she knows exactly how to use. What do you think about Caitlyn showing her fiery side? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more breakdowns like this one, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on all notifications so you never miss a thing. Click the next video on the screen and we will see you there.